Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going over a rifle that I've probably had more requests to review over the years than any other. So this is the Smith & Wesson M&P Sport 2. So I got a ton of requests to review the original M&P Sport, and honestly I never wanted to because it didn't interest me because it didn't have a desk cover or forward assist. A lot of folks said those weren't important, but we'll get into that a little bit more later on in the video. But this one here has those features, and I actually saw a report recently that said this was the #1 selling rifle in 2016 in America of all rifles. So this has certainly been a big seller for Smith & Wesson, and what we're going to see is basically, obviously it's a bargain rifle or a budget rifle. We're going to see how it performs. We're going to test the accuracy of it. We're going to go into the features and the specs of it, which really is important. I realize some folks watching this video may have found this through a Google search and you're not familiar with the specs and why they're important. We'll try to point those out, and I have other videos that I'll link in this video up in the top right corner that will sort of explain those in detail. So we'll go over the specs, what they are, what they might be, and what they might not be. I called Smith & Wesson to ask some specific questions that I couldn't find online. Didn't get a whole lot of answers there, which we'll get into a little bit later on in the video. But enough yapping from me in the intro. We're going to step outside, do an accuracy test, come back in, look at the specs, and at the end we'll let you know what we think of it overall.
Now we're going to see what kind of accuracy we can get out of this rifle. In the mag, first up, we're going to fire some Wolf. This is steel cased ammo. It's 62 grain. And the reason I picked this is I think a lot of folks who are buying these budget rifles are going to be firing steel case stuff, probably Wolf or Tula. I don't own any Tula. So we're going with the Wolf, and then we have a couple other sort of match grade loads that we're going to run through it and see what kind of accuracy we can squeeze out of it. Basically, the setup that you're looking at right now is obviously the Sport in its basic configuration. We have the IWC light mount on there with the LZ. It's not touching the barrel at all, so it shouldn't affect any accuracy. We have a primary arms 1-8 with the ACSS reticle on there. This is their sort of budget 1-8, not their platinum one, sitting in a Geissele mount. And we have a CTK precision rest that you guys see here all the time. And target downrange, 100 yards. We'll put 5 shots in each group. And as you guys can probably see, around me we got some wind going on. Shouldn't really affect things too much at 100 yards. So enough yapping, let's get to shooting. Doesn't look too bad from here. One thing I'll tell you that you absolutely notice with this gun, it's advertised as having a mil-spec trigger. It doesn't. It's not mil-spec really in any way. The materials are not the same, and also just the way it feels is not the same. When you're just plinking around at the range, you're probably not going to notice it, but when you're trying to really eke out accuracy, you do. The break is not as crisp as it is on most mil-spec triggers. And the reset is, while it's positive, is kind of almost like a spongy reset, if that makes sense. That doesn't affect accuracy at all, but just telling you what it feels like. Up next in the rifle, we have some of the Freedom munitions. This is their match grade stuff. This is, I believe, 69 grain Sierra Match Kings. Yes, it is 69 grain Sierra Match King, hollow point bolt tail bullet. And we'll see how this rifle handles this load. groups aren't looking too bad. Last up, we have another match grade load. This is the Gorilla ammunition, 55 grain loaded with the Sierra Blitzkrieg. This thing's been accurate. Any twist rifle we've put it in, we've run it in everything from 1 to 6 twist rates all the way up to, I believe, 1 to 12. And it's just a good consistent load. So we'll see how it does here. Let's go see what that measures. Honestly, I could say I'm a little bit surprised by the results here. All around, we had really good groups. Honestly, some of the best groups I've ever seen from a non-free-floated AR. So for a budget rifle, I'm not mad about that at all. First off, we had the Wolf. And we're looking at about 1.75, 1.8 inch group with that. So that's certainly pretty good. Then we moved over to the Freedom Munitions, 69 grain. And we're right at 1.25 inches center to center on that one. And then the Gorilla here, 55 grain Sierra Blitzkrieg. As you guys saw, we had 3 of those go right in the same hole. And center to center, we're looking at 0.75 rather, or 0.75 inches. Not sure if it's duplicatable. Really don't care. We don't reshoot groups here, as many of you guys know. But certainly happy with that result. Pleased, I should say. A lot of people made a big deal on the internet about this not being the 5R rifle barrel anymore. Certainly 5R rifling has an advantage in theory. But in practice, I'm not sure you could do much better than this without a free-floated rifle at all. So I personally wouldn't sweat it, at least not in the accuracy department.
We'll start up front and work our way back. At the end of the barrel, we have the A2 flash hider, very common part. I'm actually a huge fan of the A2. It does a good job at both hiding flash and mitigating recoil, so it's a good sort of combination device, and for the money, you simply can't beat it, which I imagine is why Smith & Wesson went with it. The barrel on this rifle is an interesting profile. I have no idea what it's called, but it's sort of kind of a hybrid. It's sort of a government profile out here past the front sight block, and then it's much thicker than an M4. I'm just actually going to compare it here with a actual M4 so you guys can actually see what I'm talking about. So this is a standard Colt M4 profile barrel, and you can see there that underneath the handguards, the M4 profile is significantly slimmer. Also, one thing I want to point out is that Smith & Wesson actually is almost like unfinished underneath the handguard there. It has like some sort of milling work and tool marks still in it, whereas of course on the Colt we don't have that. But even up front here, it's still even a little bit thicker than the M4 areas past the cutouts. Now, my only theory on why that might be, and Smith & Wesson went with that, was probably as a cost-cutting measure. Just having to remove less material is less time on the lathe or mill, and most people aren't going to notice. It does give you sort of a front-heavy rifle feel, though. So speaking of that, unloaded, this rifle here on my scale was 6.7 pounds, so a little bit heavier than what they list. But it definitely feels front heavy, and that's because of the profile here on the barrel. So the barrel itself is 4140 steel. The mil spec is going to be 4150. I have a full video on the differences if you guys want to check that out. And it's one of the anomalies that I couldn't get an answer for that we talked about earlier. So I called and asked if it was high pressure tested or magnetic particle inspected. And the Smith & Wesson customer service guy was, of course, very polite the whole time, but he couldn't give me the answer. So I don't know if it has that, although, like I said, it's nitrided in and out. So it seems to be, you know, a pretty decent barrel. Obviously, it shoots quite well, as you guys saw, surprisingly so. And up front here, we do have an F-marked front sight base. We have the sling swivel here on the bottom, and we also have the bayonet lug up front. Of course, if you're in a band state, they make models without those evil features. Carbine length gas system, which a lot of folks certainly aren't going to like, but they work fine. I've not had an issue with it. This rifle does seem a little bit overgassed, but even with the suppressor, didn't have an issue. So far, so good there. An area Smith & Wesson chose to cut costs for sure was on the handguards. So I'm not sure if you guys can kind of see it, but the edges here are a little bit melted. And some of you guys have watched my previous video where I dumped a Magpul D60 straight through it, and it got so hot that the edges melted a little bit. Now, is it a huge issue? No, but I'd be willing to bet if I put about 2 more mags through it after that, it probably would have permanently damage the handguards. So they chose not to go with the heat shields and just use the plastic. My guess is there's a couple reasons for that. Most people don't really shoot a high volume of fire through their guns, particularly budget guns like this, and most people probably replace their handguards one way or another, but they definitely sort of cheaped out, if you will, there, or at least cut some costs. The light mount that I'm sure you guys are going to ask about if I don't explain it is the impact weapons components light mount. It'll attach to any of your standard sort of mil-spec type handguards, and you can put like a Surefire Scout or any of the 1-inch lights on there like we have with this LZ Bones flashlight. So those are the handguards. No heat shields, that's kind of the big thing, but for some folks it won't be a problem. For others it will. You know, Magpul handguards are out there and they're $20, $30, so they're a good alternative if you have to replace them. Both the upper and lower receiver are made of forged 7075 T6 aluminum, and one thing you probably already noticed is that the finish on them is different. You can see the forge mark on the upper, so you can let Google go wild with who actually made it, but I'm guessing it's someone different than who made the lower because they really don't match up at all. Not a huge deal, but folks who are really into fit and finish will notice that for sure. We have the M&P 15, of course, laser engraved here on the lower, and the actual mag wall is opened up a little bit more than the mil-spec one, which is something that I like, and I think all AR-15 manufacturers should do that. It aids with magazine reloads and really doesn't cost anything, so there's no reason not to do that. The lower also has the built-in trigger guard, which I do like. It's a little bit larger than the mil-spec one. It's a little bit easier to get your finger in there if you're using gloves. It also, for a lot of us, the bottom part of our finger will drag on the trigger guard, the standard trigger guard, and this one doesn't have that at all. So good on Smith & Wesson for that. The upper receiver on the Sport 2 has a couple of features that the original Sport didn't have, to include the dust cover and the forward assist. I'm a big fan of both. The dust cover helps the rifle stay sealed up and keep any sort of debris out of the action. And the forward assist, while some may argue that there's no need to ever use it, I do use it. I tap it every now and then, and I'm not sure what good it does, but it makes me feel good, and that's what's important, right? So the upper also has the T marks on there, and it has the M4 feed ramps on the inside. One thing I want to point out, though, that's a little bit odd about this particular rifle, I've handled a lot of AR-15s in my day, easily hundreds, probably thousands in all reality, and the dust cover rather has a feature or a thing that I've never actually noticed before. So most dust covers have a little, or I should say upper receivers have a little detent sort of cut out there, detent notch cut out where this detent here on the dust cover goes into. This one has it, but they don't line up. So when you actually go to close this dust cover, it's extremely difficult. So watch, you can see, sort of see the whites here on my thumbs probably change as I push down on it, and you have to push extremely hard to get it out. Now, it hasn't caused any issues in the first shot of every magazine, or first shot after closing it each time has not been an issue, but it is something to point out because I've simply never seen that before. Earlier in the video, during the accuracy portion, I mentioned that the trigger is not mil-spec, and I'm sure some folks had questions about that. So you can see here it's not. On the left here we have this Colt, and it does have your standard mil-spec type trigger, and you can see it actually looks different. This appears to be some sort of MIM or metal injected molding, which can be okay, but just pointing out that it is different, and it actually feels different too when you fire it. It's just not as crisp as some of the other standard mil-spec triggers. Now it breaks right at 7 pounds in my gauge, and obviously we were able to get good results with it out there for groups, so not an issue there. But I just wanted to point out that it is different, and again, it's probably just one of those areas that Smith & Wesson is sort of cutting costs on. So you can see the rest of the receiver that looks good all around, no machine marks or anything like that. Good clean receiver, so nothing to write home about, but nothing to complain about either. The buffer in there is a carbine buffer, and if you look around, you will see that there is very weak staking here on the castle nut, but it is staked. The receiver extension there is a mil-spec diameter. However, when I called, they wouldn't tell me if it was made out of 7075 T6 aluminum or 6061. So You know, again, they said they weren't allowed to disclose product information. They said it was T6. I said, well, that's not a thing. It's a 7075 T6 or 6061 T6. They couldn't tell me what the first four numbers. They could only tell me that it was T6. So I kind of laughed at that a little bit. But unfortunately, I don't know what the material is and can't pass that along to you. The stock, however, is just a basic sort of carbine type stock. It does have your adjustable positions, and of course, if you want to add any sort of mil-spec dimension stock, you can afterwards, and it'll work just fine. The bolt carrier on the rifle is a phosphate finish with a chromed interior as well as a chrome lined gas key, so those are certainly good things. It is a semi-auto carrier though, and for those who are unfamiliar with that, here's what a full auto carrier would look like. So you can see that extra material there on the bottom, and what that does is gives it a little bit more mass, which is a good thing for smoothing out the action. It also allows it to trip an auto or 3-round burst sear. So this one does not have that capability. A lot of folks out there don't like that, but again, the rifle hasn't had any issues, so that's certainly a good thing. The staking there on the key is good. No issues there at all to report. The charging handle, just a standard mil-spec styles charging handle, no issues. And the bolt itself is 158 Carpenter steel. However, I called to see if it was high pressure tested instead of just being magnetic particle tested, which it actually is, and it actually shows that on the bolt, so good on them. Again, they wouldn't tell me if it was high pressure tested or not, so can't say on that one for sure. On the extractor, we do have the black O-ring insert on there for more reliable extracting in certain conditions, so that's certainly not an issue, but all in all, the bolt carrier group appears to be okay. Again, there are reports of these rifles having high round counts with no issues, so so far so good there. That should pretty much cover the detail. Another thing I want to point out is that the rifle does come with the Magpul M-Bus rear sight. It also comes with a 30-round PMag, assuming you live in a free state. So that's good. A lot of the other budget rifles out there don't come with those features. So check one in the box for the Smith & Wesson M&P Sport. So some things I don't like about it. The barrel profile, like I talked about, if they ever come out with a M&P Sport 3, if you could trim down that barrel profile, that would be awesome, because I think most folks simply don't need that heavy of a barrel, particularly folks that are buying this type of rifle, because they're just not going to be putting a lot of sustained fire through it. But of course, it certainly performed. It was shockingly accurate. Shockingly, I did not expect that at all, particularly for a non-free floated AR. So I don't know if it's a sample size of one or if I just got lucky or what the case was, but the rifle certainly can shoot, so we can't take that away at all. Some other things, of course, I wish they would just list the specs, for certain things, because if you guys are familiar with gun forums, everyone just assumes the worst. So if it is the worst, you might as well just tell us, not have people go into conspiracy theories about it, because it's always good to know those things, so that way you know what you're getting as a buyer. But there are reports of these rifles out there going, 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 rounds without issues. So they certainly have a really good track record. The Smith & Wesson Sport, there's very few people that, if you read anybody criticizing out there online, will say, oh, well, they suck, they don't work. You almost never read that. So they seem to be rifles that work. And one good thing is that it's from Smith & Wesson, so they have a real good warranty, one of the best in the business. For those that don't know, I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts, so this was built right in my hometown. And it's good to see that they're still putting out good rifles out of there, particularly at this price point. I picked this one up from Primary Arms. When I got it, it was $5.99. I looked today, it was $4.99. So the prices seem to be dropping. So for $500 to get a rifle like this with a magazine and sight that's ready to go to the range, it's with the Smith & Wesson warranty and sort of the pedigree of it, you're getting a lot for your money for sure. I can see why people are attracted to them. Absolutely. I mean, they skimp on some things like we talked about, but you get a rifle that works. And at the end of the day, for a lot of folks, that's what's really important. So pros and cons to it, but people who have messaged me over the years will know that when they've said they're looking for a complete budget AR-15, I generally say get the Aero Precision or the Smith & Wesson M&P Sport. Of course, there's others out there that are always coming into the market, but the ones that have been out for a while and established, those are the two I tend to lean towards. So I guess that says something, and certainly it's proven it so far in its performance here. We're going to keep using it on the channel. You guys are going to see it going forward. I actually have some tests planned for it this weekend that we're going to be using it with, so definitely more to follow on this one. But if you guys have any questions about the rifle that we didn't answer here in the video, by all means, you can post down below in the comment section. You can also post over at my Facebook page as always. But thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for subscribing. If you're a new viewer here, definitely hit that subscribe button. Check out what we do here on the channel. If If you like the video, you'll probably like the future ones as well.